right, y'all, this is going to be the lecture for homework 19. Like I said in the last video for 18, these are paired together. Homework 18 and 19 are the same day, due the same day, assigned the same day. We just split them into two because there are two formulas, and students kind of told us they would prefer each formula being its own homework, but they are still, treat them as, one lecture altogether. Finish homework 18, then come through and do 19. So 19 kind of signals a shift in the class where we're going to start moving to writing equations of lines. We're still talking about lines. We're still talking about y equals mx plus b. We're just, you know how to graph now. That was really test 2 kind of tested the graphing. Y equals mx plus b. And then since then, we've talked about how to do the x and y intercepts and things like that, okay? So we're still talking about graphing and y equals mx plus b and all that. And that is, when we say equations of lines, typically we mean y equals mx plus b, because that's kind of the format we all like it in, right? And remember what this is called. The names are going to start mattering now. This is called slope intercept. I like to put a little dash between them. I don't think it's actually there, but it's kind of in my head it is, you know what I mean? So slope intercept is kind of our main formula. It's not standard form. Standard form means something else, so don't call it that. It's called slope intercept. Up until now, I've given you the equation and you graphed it, right? Here's y equals mx plus b, graph the line. Well, from here on out, we're going to be talking about giving me the equation of the line. I give you the graph, or I give you some information, and you give me the equation of the line, okay? So we're just going to jump right into it. This is not the only way for this to be done. I should add, we're going to be using what's called point slope. So we're going to be doing this with point slope. This is not the only way to find equations of lines. You might know another way that you think is easier. It doesn't matter to me how you do it. Be warned. There are some problems in the homework and potentially on the test that will ask you to leave your answer in point slope, which I haven't told you what that is. So, right now I'm just talking generically. If you do this a different way, you will get the correct y equals mx plus b. But if I ask you to put it in point slope, there's only one way to get point slope, and that is to use point slope. So be careful. When I say I don't care how you do these problems, I mean, if the problem just says, give me y equals mx plus b, how you get there does not matter to me as long as you've done it legitimately. There are going to be some problems that will force you to use this method. So even if you do know another method, you will need to know this one as well. You'll see what I mean very shortly. Let's just jump right into it. Let's say I asked you to write the equation of a line, and I'm going to abbreviate a lot because I don't want to keep writing the same thing over and over again. Write the equation of a line, and let's say the slope is equal to 4. They just give it to you right away, and you got a point 0, negative 3, okay? You've actually already done this. Write the equation of a line with a slope of 4 and a point of 0, negative 3. You've actually already done this because this is your m, right? The slope is m. And this point, what's special about this point? You need to recognize this. You may not yet, but you're going to need to by the time test 3 rolls around. This is the y-intercept. How did I know that? Which, remember, is b, right? That's the y-intercept, which is b. How did I know that that's the y-intercept? Remember, this is from the last lecture, or lecture I think is homework 17. All y-intercepts have 0 for the x. So if you're given a slope and a point that has a 0 for the x, that's your m and your b, you're done. Y equals m, which is 4, times x, and then our b was negative 3, and we're finished. That's as simple as it'll get. It usually won't be that simple, because the problem is, what if I didn't give you the y-intercept? What if I gave you some other random point? That's the issue here, right? Because if I give you the slope and the y-intercept, that's it. That's m and that's b. You're done. But what if I gave you the slope and some other point that was not b? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So the first example is as simple as it'll get. Here's the slope. Here's the y-intercept. Put them together. You're done. All right? And there will be some problems like that. Now, the thing is, they're not going to warn you. They're just going to say, write the equation. So if you don't catch that that's the y-intercept, you might be doing a lot more work than you need to. Let's say, same thing, basically. Write the equation of a line. And let's say it said that the slope equals negative 7. So they give you the slope straight away. And then they give you this point here, which is just some random point out in the middle of nowhere, right? That's the slope. So that's definitely m. We still have m. But this point, this is not b. This is not our y-intercept. This doesn't have 0 for the x. If it was our y-intercept, it would have 0 for the x, and it does not. So this is just a slope and then some random point, and now they want the equation. We're still talking usually, unless the instructions say something different. We're still talking about y equals mx plus b here. The problem is that's not b. If you put y equals negative 7x plus 8. It's wrong, and I will not give you any partial credit because that tells me you're not paying any attention at all. Yeah, the slope's negative 7, but your point is not 0, 8. That is not the y-intercept. Y-intercepts have a 0 in the x, right? This one has a 6 in the x, so it's just some other point. So what we're going to do, and this is kind of where the new formula comes in, we're going to use this idea, this formula called point slope. Real quickly, just so you understand the idea. Point slope is like a machine. You put in a point, excuse me, you put in a slope, m, you put in a point, x1, y1, right, like we talked about before, and out comes y equals mx plus b. That's the idea here. That's the focus of this idea, is we're going to put in a slope and a point, we're going to do the math, and out comes y equals mx plus b. Point slope is not a substitute for y equals mx plus b. It is a way to get to y equals mx plus b, all right? Point slope looks like the following. It's a little bit complicated looking at first, but once you've done this a few times, you'll get used to it. Y equals m, because we're trying to make y equals mx plus b, remember, times x minus x1, and then plus or minus y1. So it's kind of like an uglier version of y equals mx plus b, right? Now these pieces are still the same. That's still your slope, m. And this x1, y1 here is a point. x1, y1, it's a point. And if you think about it, y'all, that's why we call it point slope, because all you need is a slope and a point. A point and a slope and a point. That's the idea. What did you get in this problem? I mean, and I'm being sort of silly here, but sometimes I get frustrated with students because they'll on the test, they'll blank out on these. And I'll say, you know, what happened? How come, you know, you blanked on it? And they'll say, well, all I had is a slope and a point. I didn't know what to do with it. Brother, you just said what to do with it. A slope and a point slope, slope, point, slope. That's the name of the formula. So as long as you remember the formula, if you're on the test and you go, oh, I got a point and a slope, well, then use point slope. I mean, again, I'm being silly, but I'm not. So how does this work? Well, it's not too bad. Let's put in our stuff here. Kind of do it over on this side. Y equals, because remember, y and x are still your variables. You still need a y and x in the answer. Y equals blah, 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 mx plus b. Y and x are your variables. This y, this x, those are variables. They stay y and x. Your m is your slope, which we already know is negative 7. That, like I just said, is your variable x. You leave it alone. X minus, now x1, in our case, we should label this point x1, y1. There is no other point to call x2, y2, but that's just all that is, a label. Our point here is the x is 6, so x minus x1 was x minus 6. And the plus and minus just means if it's positive, put a plus. If it's minus, put a negative, and that's a positive 8. So there's our formula in point slope. So if the instruction said, leave the answer in point slope, you'd be done. But again, in this case, I want to go ahead and do all the way to y equals mx plus b. So it just depends. If they told you to put it in point slope, that would be the answer to the problem. But let's go ahead and work this out. So y equals, we're going to distribute negative 7 times x, that's negative 7x. Negative 7 times negative 6, that's positive 42, plus 8. That's going to be y equals negative 7x plus 50. So that's your final answer. And I will bring a couple things to your attention. We were supposed to write the equation, and we did. Y equals negative 7x plus 50. If they asked us to leave it in point slope, we were done here. But in this case, I said I wanted to go all the way to y equals mx plus b, so we went here. Notice you were given the slope. The negative 7 was given to you right away. But where did the 50 come from? Not anywhere over here. You will not be able to guess the y-intercept. You get what I'm saying? If you look, that's why I said, if you put negative 7x plus 8 and you just take this point and steal it, I'll know you're not paying attention, because that's not a y-intercept. That's some random point out in the middle of nowhere. That's not your y-intercept. You can't guess it. The number 50 didn't show up anywhere until the very end of the problem. So be careful with these. You can't anticipate it. You got to work it all the way out and pay attention to what they ask for. Again, if they said point slope is what you need to leave the formula in, this is it. You're done. If they said leave it in slope intercept, y equals mx plus b, then it's right here. One other thing I'm going to say about this formula, let me box this off. There's another version of it, and if you use it, I don't care. I'll give you the full credit on the test. I don't like it though, and here's what it is. I'm not going to mention this again. This is just a quick mention. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This is another version of point slope. It just has the y1 being brought over here. So my question though is, why would you use this? If you're trying to make y equals mx plus b, don't you want the y by itself? Well, why would you use a formula where you don't have y by itself? You know what I'm saying? These formulas are the same. This version's a little bit better though, because y is already by itself, and that's what you're trying to make. So I don't like this formula. I won't be using it. If you use it on the test, I'll not give you, if it says leave it in point slope and you leave it like this, that's fine. I think the computer even asked you on one of the questions to recognize that this is another version. But generally speaking, this is the one I'm going to use in the homework and on the lecture. So just be warned, all right? Take a minute, make sure you're cool. This lecture is a little bit heavy, so feel free to pause, stop, and catch up. No problem at all. All right, so let's just go ahead and do another practice problem. And that's pretty much it. Luckily, that's the majority of the new materials, that formula. You've just got to memorize it. You've got to know how to use it and not get intimidated by it. So before we start on this next one, let's go ahead and just rewrite our formulas. We have y equals mx plus or minus b, which again, this is slope-intercept. Pay attention because depending on what the question says, the formula or the answer needs to be left in. If they say slope-intercept, they mean y equals mx plus b. The formula we just talked about is called point slope, and it will give you y equals mx plus b. Remember, that's the idea. The idea here is that this one gives you this one. We also had one other formula, which we'll need here in a little while, which was the formula for the slope. You will need to know all three of these formulas for the exam, so I'm just getting them all in one place for you right now. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's just do another example just like the last one. Let's say we said write the equation of a line. And let's say they said has a slope of 3/5, because it's not always going to be a nice clean number, you know what I mean? And it goes through the point, or passing through is what they like to say, 2, 2. So again, recognize that this is a slope, but this is not the y-intercept. This is not b, because if this had a 0 in the x, then it would be our b, we'd have our m, our b, we'd be done. But right now, what we have is a slope and a point. So think about it, a slope and a point and a slope. Use point slope. Use this formula here. Y equals m, which is 3/5, times x minus x1. Now again, this is the only point, but we'll call it x1, y1. X minus x1, so x minus 2. And then again, the plus and minus just means if it's positive, put a plus like it is here. So that would be your formula if you asked for it in point slope. If they asked for the answer in point slope, you're done. That's it right there. If we wanted in y equals mx plus b, we need to go a little bit further. So again, I'm just rewriting it. We have y equals 3/5 x, or 3/5 times x minus 2 plus 2. We need to go ahead and get this into y equals mx plus b. So let's distribute. 3/5 times x, that's 3/5 x. That's no big deal. 3/5 times -2, I'm going to go ahead and put a little star here, and I'm going to do it off to the side. You got to remember how fractions work, my friends. 3/5 times -2, wouldn't that be -2/1? Don't we just multiply straight across? So it'll be -6/5. You got to remember how fractions work, guys. That's why I said you might find this homework to be a little bit troublesome, because all of a sudden you're having to do fractions again. It will be on the final, so make sure you review. So 3/5 x minus 6/5, that's 3/5 x minus 6/5. And then don't forget we have this plus 2. So unfortunately now we have to add these fractions. And this is kind of, something that can happen sometimes. So we'll put another little star. We'll come up here and do it here. So that's -6/5 plus 2/1. Remember, when you add and subtract, you need common denominator. So I'm going to have to multiply this by 5 to top and bottom to make it match. So we'll have -6/5 plus 10/5 equals 4/5. So in the end, our answer is y equals 3/5x plus 4/5. Take a minute, digest, redo the problem, walk through it, especially those little 2 fraction workouts there. This is the, I don't want to say this is as bad as it gets, because that's sort of objective or subjective. Everybody feels like different things are harder. But, I wanted to do one with you where you have a fraction and it's not necessarily going to come out sweet. So just to reiterate, our slope was 3/5, that's m. Our point was 2, 2. So it's y equals m times x minus x1, which in our case was 2, plus or minus, in our case, plus 2. If that was point slope, we could have left it, depends on what the question asked for. We had to go ahead and get y equals mx plus b though, so we said 3/5 times x, that's 3/5 x. 3/5 times -2, that's -6/5. That was done right here. Then we said, well, I still got to add the -6/5 and the 2. that was done up here to our final answer there. So it's quite a bit of work, guys. It's quite a bit of work. Okay, make sure you're ready. Make sure you know how to do this. You can anticipate 3, 4, 5 of these kind of problems on the test because homework 20 actually involves this as well. So do not forget this and do not blow this off. All right, let's go ahead and just do another example. Because ultimately that is what we're talking about here, right? I'm gonna write the formula up here one more time. Just because it's kind of complicated and people like having it, you know, right there. All right. So let's say that they gave us something a little different this time. Same thing, you know, write the equation of a line. So the instructions are not changing. But let's say instead of saying a slope and a point, what if they just gave you 2 points? What if they just said, write the equation of a line going through -4, 0 and 0, 12. Just 2 different points. They didn't even give you the slope. So this is the worst case scenario. This is the one that's going to cause the most work. Think about the steps we've done in the last few problems, and this might help you. If you're getting confused, think about the steps here. There's 3 steps really when you're writing the equation of a line. First is get the slope. The second is get the y-intercept. Third is if there is no y-intercept, use point slope. That's really the 3-step procedure here. And in fact, let's go back and look at that against the one we just did real quick. First thing I did here in this equation was get the slope. Now in this case, the slope was given to me straight up. So when it says get the slope, in the last 2 problems, we had the slope right away. Then it says get the y-intercept. Well, the problem was this point was not the y-intercept. So step 2 didn't happen. Step 3 says if there was no y-intercept, which is what we had here, then you got to use point slope. Think back to the very first one we did at the very beginning of the lecture, right? Same procedure. This was the easy one, right? First step was to get the slope. Well, they gave it to me. Second step is to get the y-intercept. Well, they gave it to me. So you're done. So it just depends, right? If you think about it, that is the procedure we've been using. I just didn't necessarily write it out stepwise, but there it is. So the first step is to get the slope. Whether they give it to you or not, you need the slope because, I mean, think about it. We're using point slope. Well, that's what that other formula was for in homework 18, right? Remember, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So which point is x1 and x2 and y2 and all that stuff for x1 and y1 and x2 and y2? Again, it doesn't matter. We'll just call that one x1, y1. We'll just call that one x2, y2. It's just a label, okay? So the first thing you're gonna need to do is get your slope. y2, which is 12, minus y1, which is 0, over x2, which is 0, minus, careful, x1, which is -4. Watch your signs. I said that in the last video, and then I made a sign error immediately after. Luckily, you caught it. 12 minus 0 is 12. 0 minus -4, that's 0 plus 4, which is 4, and 12 over 4 is 3. So your slope is 3. Get the slope. We're done. We got it. It's 3. So you may have to find it yourself. That's the thing. They may not give it to you straight up. It's nice if they do. And in that case, step 1 is done. But in a lot of times, you won't have the slope, and you'll have to find it using the formula from last homework. Okay. Now, the second step is to get the y-intercept. Do we have a y-intercept? Well, we do. Because remember, x-intercepts, which is not what we're looking for, x-intercepts have 0 for the y, so that's great. That's an x-intercept. Y-intercepts have 0 for the x, which is the y, which means that this is our y-intercept right here. 0, 12. That is our y-intercept. So we've already got the y-intercept. 0, 12. That's b. So technically, we're done. Y equals 3x plus 12. Now, I know what some of you were thinking already. What if I didn't know that that was the y-intercept? What if I didn't realize that? What if I looked at 0, 12, and I said, well, I didn't recognize that for the y-intercept. I just thought it was some random point. Well, first of all, shame on you. You've got to recognize this is the y-intercept by the time the test rolls around. But here's the good news. Even if you said there is no y-intercept, you can still go the third way and use point slope. So watch. Y equals m, which we knew to be 3, times, we'll use the first point, x1, y1, x minus -4. Watch out, there's that double negative just like in the slope formula. And then the y1 was 0, so we put plus 0. So y equals m times x minus x1 plus or minus y1, just using the point slope formula. Y equals 3 times x, that's 3x. And isn't that just plus 4 right there because of the negative and negative? So 3 times positive 4, that's 12. We still have the 0 on the end. And when you clean it up, you get y equals 3x plus 12. So what I'm trying to show here, guys, is if you keep your head about you, you might be able to skip the third step, the ugly step, and doing all this work, because if you catch that they gave you the slope and the y-intercept, you're done. If you don't catch that it's the y-intercept, you will have to use point slope. Or what if they just didn't give you the y-intercept? Totally possible. Then you'll have to use point slope anyway. So theoretically, this problem could be done by simply finding the slope, recognizing the y-intercept, you're done. If you didn't recognize the y-intercept, you can go the long way to get to the same answer. So just be aware, guys, there is a bit of a decision to make here, but ultimately using point slope is always correct. It just may not be the shortest way to go, okay? Take a minute, catch up, make sure you're good with that, and then we'll move on. All right, so now let's go ahead and do one where they give you some points and you don't have the y-intercept, right? Because it's nice if you do, right? The last one we just did, like I said, we could have kind of shortcutted it. Hey, there's the y-intercept, we're done. That's usually not going to be the case. I mean, look for it, but don't expect it. What if I said, write the equation of a line, and I just gave you 2 points again, just like last time, -3, -16, and 5, I don't know, whatever, 16. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Be careful now. This is not going to make 0 like you probably think it will. So let's go ahead and just say we got our x1 and our y1 and our x2 and our y2. What's the first step when we're finding the equation is to get the slope. We were not given the slope here, so let's go ahead and do that first. y2, 16, minus y1, which is -16, over x2, which is 5, minus x1, which was -3. Watch your negatives, guys. It's very important. Remember, I'm just using the slope formula here from homework 18. 16 minus -16, that's 16 plus 16, that's 32. That is not 0, be careful. 5 plus 3, that's 8, and 32 over 8 is 4. So now we have our slope, which is 4, check. Second step, get the y-intercept if you have it. That's not a y-intercept. How do I know that? Y-intercepts always have 0 for the x. So that's not a y-intercept, and neither is this one. So step 2 ain't happening. We're going to have to go to step 3. If no y-intercept, use point slope. Okay? So we've got our point. We got 2 points, actually. And we've got our slope, so let's use point slope. Y equals m times x minus x1 plus or minus y1. So y equals m, which was 4. We just found that out, and that's why you have to find the slope first, times x minus x1 is -3, so it's x minus -3. Watch out for the double negative. I know I keep saying it, but it's important. And then plus or minus y1. Well, y1 is -16, so minus 16, okay? Now we need to go ahead and work this out. I probably should clean up that parenthesis first. Because negative and negative, that's really +3, right? Now we distribute. 4 times x, that's 4x. 4 times 3, that's 12. Don't forget the minus 16 still at the end. So now we have y equals 4x. 12 minus 16, that's -4. And there's your answer. Hopefully that was a little quicker, a little smoother. But I do want to point out to you guys, again, the b was not in the problem. The slope was 4, yeah, but where did -4 come from? Not up here. You have to do the point slope formula to find it. So just be ready to do the work, okay? Let's do a couple others, guys. Let's do 1 more, 2 more, maybe 3 more. Because this is, just really just example-based, I guess you could say. I mean, that's the idea. You've seen it all, so I don't want to beat it into the ground, but let's do a couple more. Let's say I said, write the equation. And I said the slope, let's give you something nasty this time, is -13 over 9. And the point is 0, -8. Okay? Try this one on your own. See what you can do with this, and let's see if we get the same answer in the end. First step is to find the slope, which I have, negative 13 over 9. Now we'll go ahead and say this is x1 and y1. That's our point. So I'm going to go ahead and use point slope. Y equals negative 13 over 9 times x minus x1, which is 0. Hopefully this is becoming pretty normal now. And then y1 is negative 8, so minus 8. Remember, if they ask you for it in point slope, this is point slope right here. Let's go ahead and get y equals mx plus b, because that's usually what they want. So negative 13 over 9 times x, that's negative 13 over 9x. Negative 13 over 9 times 0 is just 0. You could say plus 0 because negative and negative, but it doesn't matter. And don't forget you have the minus 8 off to the side. Finishing this up, we have y equals negative 13 over 9x, and 0 minus 8 is just negative 8. So that wasn't too bad. That was an example of one that went pretty quickly. Hopefully, you're screaming at the computer right now. You didn't need to do all that. No, I didn't. Because and notice I didn't write the steps down because I wanted you to remember them. What is the steps? First step, find the slope. Well, that was given to you. Second step, find the y-intercept. It was given to you. How do I know that? Because the x was 0. So I'm done. Right away. You didn't need to do any of this. You could have just said, oh, this is going to be y equals negative 13 over 9x minus 8. Why? Because the x was 0 here. Think back to the last problem we did. The x's were not 0, so I did not have my y-intercept and I had to go the long way. In this problem, hopefully you caught it. You had the y-intercept sitting right there, so you could just bang it out and be done. But notice going the long way still worked. That's the beautiful thing, y'all. The long way still works. So whether you get, you catch the shortcut or not, it's not the end of the world. It's nice if you do, though, because it'll certainly save you some time. What if they asked you this, though? This is a little bit different. What if I said, and this will probably be it, because we've done, this is what you're doing in the homework. Rewatch the examples. If you need some help, send me an email, but we'll do one more. Write the equation. Let's just say they said of a line with undefined slope going through, it doesn't really matter. Let's just say 0, or no, let's just say 4,7, something like that. Okay? So write the equation of a line with an undefined slope going through 4,7. So what's the steps? First step is to find the slope, right? Well, right off the bat, they told you the slope is undefined. So we have a problem. And if you say, well, I'm going to go ahead and use point slope anyway, how? How are you going to plug undefined into M, right? Because that is your slope. That's not a number. You can't plug that in. If they said 0 slope, okay, you can plug that in. 0 is a number, right? Undefined is not a number. So you can't plug it in. So what are you going to have to do here? This one is actually an easy question if you remember the information you're supposed to remember, and it's damn near impossible if you don't. So this is a warning. Do not forget about vertical and horizontal lines. When you see undefined slope, your first thought should be that means this is a vertical line. This is out, right? I can't use the formula because I don't even have a number slope. It's a vertical line. That doesn't really answer the question though, because I said I wanted the equation of a line. Well, what's the equation of a vertical line look like? You've got to remember this. The equation of a vertical line is x equals some number. So that's what your answer should look like. X equals some number. Well, what number should it be? Well, there was only one x value you were given in the whole problem, and that's 4. And there's your answer. So once again, vertical and horizontal lines are tricky, but they're easy. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, I didn't have to do any work. On the other hand, I had to remember that undefined means vertical, and I had to remember that vertical lines have a special equation that looks like this. If that was 0, it would be horizontal, and the equation would be y equals a number. So be careful with the vertical and horizontal. As usual, they can be trouble, all right? That's enough. Watch the examples. You've seen what you need to do here. It's a little bit complicated depending on the numbers. It can be a little bit ugly. This is going to be heavily featured on test 3 though, guys, so don't blow this off. Email me if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next one.